thank you for the wonderful introduction. And thank you to all of you who are on the call. So we will say prayers. We'll actually get into the discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll be reading from the 10th chapter, text number 11. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, this chapter is entitled The Opulence of the Absolute. We'll read the Sanskrit, the translation, and then we'll get into some discussion based upon the wonderful points which Krishna and His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada are sharing. So, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. Tesham evanukampatam aham agyana jam tamaha nashayam yatmabhavasto gyana dipena bhashvata. Translation, word for word. Tesham, for them, eva, certainly, anukampa, artam, to show special mercy, aham, I, agyana, jam, due to ignorance, tamaha, darkness, nashayami, dispel, atmabhava, within their hearts, staha, situated, jnana, of knowledge, dipena, with the lamp, bhashvata, glowing. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. This is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, now the purport by Srila Prabhupada. When Lord Chaitanya was in Benares promulgating the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thousands of people were following him. Prakashananda Saraswati, a very influential and learned scholar in Benares at the time, derided Lord Chaitanya for being a sentimentalist. Sometimes Mayavadi philosophers criticize the devotees because they think that most of the devotees are in the darkness of ignorance and are philosophically naive sentimentalists. Actually, that is not the fact. There are very, very learned scholars who have put forward the philosophy of devotion. But even if a devotee does not take advantage of their literatures or of his spiritual master, if he is sincere in his devotional service, he is helped by Krishna himself within his heart. So the sincere devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness cannot be without knowledge. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers think that without discriminating, one cannot have pure knowledge. For them, this answer is given by the Supreme Lord. Those who are engaged in pure devotional service, even though they be without sufficient education and even without sufficient knowledge of the Vedic principles, are still helped by the Supreme God as stated in this verse. The Lord tells Arjuna that basically there is no possibility of understanding the supreme truth, the absolute truth, the supreme personality of Godhead simply by speculating. For the supreme truth is so great that it is not possible to understand him or to achieve him simply by making a mental effort. Man can go on speculating for several millions of years, and if he is not devoted, if he is not a lover of the supreme truth, he will never understand Krishna or the supreme truth. Only by devotional service is the supreme truth Krishna pleased, and by his inconceivable energy, he can reveal himself to the heart of the pure devotee. The pure devotee always has Krishna within his heart, and with the presence of Krishna, those who are just like the sun, the darkness of ignorance is at once dissipated. This is a special mercy rendered by the pure devotee rendered to the pure devotee by Krishna. Due to the contamination of material association, through many millions of births, one's heart is always covered with the dust of materialism. But when one engages in devotional service and constantly chants Hare Krishna, the dust quickly clears and one is elevated to the platform of pure knowledge. The ultimate goal, Vishnu, can be attained only by this chant and by devotional service, and not by mental speculation or argument. The pure devotee does not have to worry about the material necessities of life. He need not be anxious, because when he removes the darkness from his heart, everything is provided automatically by the Supreme Lord, who is pleased by the loving devotional service of the devotee. This is the essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. By studying Bhagavad Gita, one can become a soul completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord and engage himself in pure devotional service. As the Lord takes charge, one becomes completely free of all kinds of materialistic endeavors. Okay. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Virjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Chikatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchikapatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, as literally all the verses in the Bhagavad Gita are, is extremely deep and powerful, but it is also extremely practical. Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, and what he's really speaking about in this verse is the process of revelation. Okay? He's speaking to Arjuna about how one gains perfect understanding. In the modern world, we have a big issue. We have a big issue in the modern world because in the modern context, everyone has such extraordinary pride. In the modern context, in the modern world, there is a pandemic of arrogance. And that pandemic of arrogance leads to blindness. And that blindness, or the ignorance, which Krishna speaks about here, is the root cause of all of our suffering. That is our teaching. Our teachings in our Vaishnava tradition is that the root cause of all suffering is ignorance. And what we're being given in the Bhagavad Gita, in this verse, is Krishna's formula for freedom from ignorance. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. There's a small print to this verse. The small print to this verse is one word. And that one word is sincerity. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will go on to say that he, let's see, he goes on to talk about how he gives knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Krishna makes this point, which is absolutely critical and which very much links with what we're reading here. Krishna is making the point, Sarvasya chahamriti shani vishto matas smriti jnanam apohanam cha. Vedesha sarve aham eva vedyo, vedantakrit vedavit eva chaham. For me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Now, what does that mean? Why knowledge? Why remembrance? Why forgetfulness? The root cause of all these responses is sincerity of desire. So if someone is sincerely wanting to know the truth, they get one response. If someone is sincerely wanting to be ignorant, they get another response. So what we know and what we don't know in regards to the absolute truth is based upon the sincerity of our desire to know. You have many people in the world right now who are atheists. I saw a debate a while ago, and it was a famous atheist, and they were in a debate with someone who believed in God, and they were having these arguments back and forth. And I was thinking that this atheist, the reason why he doesn't understand the truth is because deep within the core of their hearts, they don't want to. And that unwillingness to know the truth, it also links to something else. The unwillingness to know the truth also links to the unwillingness to be humble. Prabhupada says in this purport that actually the truth cannot be known just by making a mental effort. He said man can go on speculating for several millions of years, and if he is not devoted, if he is not a lover of the supreme truth, he will never understand Krishna or the supreme truth. It's a very, very powerful point. If someone is more powerful than us, the only way that they can be realized or understood is by their own willingness to reveal themselves. Very simple. So what happens in the modern society, people want to argue about something. So someone has an argument, okay, I believe in God and I argue I argue my logic. Someone else says, I don't believe in God, and they argue their logic. The devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we take a different approach. Although our philosophy gives so many reasonable points, our principles end in practice. Okay, what do I mean? Our principles end in practice. If you go to a restaurant, you're hungry, someone else is hungry. The restaurateur, the waiters deliver the food. And then your friend is about to start eating, but you say, hold on, don't eat. Let's discuss whether we feel that the food will taste nice or not. You could be arguing for a long time. You could be debating about whether the food tastes nice or not for a long time. Someone comes by your table. Just want to check how the meal's going. We haven't started eating yet. We're sitting down debating whether the food tastes good or not. The person looks at you thinking, sorry, I think I've misunderstood what you're saying. Could you tell me again what you said? Yeah, we're not eating the food. We're having a debate to see if we believe the food tastes good or not. I believe the food doesn't taste good. My friend on the other side believes the food does taste good. And the person who comes by the table says, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I was just wondering, maybe the best thing would be just to put the food in your mouth and actually conclusively understand whether it tastes good or not. No, we're not going to do that. That's disgusting. You know, I don't believe in that tasting food. I'm going to argue that it doesn't taste good. Well, I hear you, but your arguments by definition are inconclusive. Not only are your arguments inconclusive, but you have the ability to put the food in your mouth and taste it and conclude by direct experience. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep arguing. There's something wrong here. There's something wrong here. What's the issue? The issue is, and one person I know spoke about this. The issue with this type of approach, one friend had this term, conclusophobia. If you have the ability to check and you insist rather than checking that you're just going to argue about it, then it means there's something wrong here. There's some kind of insincerity, right? Because you're arguing about something that you could conclusively experience. So in this modern society, many people are like that. They would rather argue, as Krishna or as Prabhupada is saying in this purport, how are you going to know God by mental effort? The very definition of the Supreme Person is he is beyond the limitations of the material energy. So the mind, bhumya ponalavaya, karmana buddhyevacha, ahankarityamin bina prakriti ashtada. Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. He says, these are what? These are my separated energies, the material elements. Then he says, apariyamatastvanyam, prakritim vidime pram, jiva bhuta mahabaho, yayadam dayate jagat. But he says, superior to these material elements is a living entity, the spirit soul who is trying to enjoy the material energy. So by definition, if we try to use the mind, mana, the intelligence, buddhi, we're trying to use the material to understand that which is beyond the material energy itself. It doesn't make sense. It's logically inconsistent. Now we can go a step further. We can go a step further and we can consider what it means to actually know something, okay? So this is really interesting. There are 3 levels. Now, the lowest level spiritually is the highest level in the material world. So let's start there. In the material world, people praise someone as being very intelligent. You've got a great intelligence, you've got a high IQ, you graduated at this university, that university. And they think that because I'm very intelligent, I understand things. Wrong. Wrong. You see, in fact, and a lot of people know this in the espionage field, you can easily fool people with a high IQ, right? Sounds strange, doesn't it, right? But it's absolutely true. You can easily fool someone who's got a high IQ if you feed them the wrong understanding, the wrong information. What is intelligence? Intelligence means that someone is just very good at processing whatever limited information that they have to hand. So intelligence is like a processor. But the question then becomes, what is the information that they are processing? So in espionage, what they often do, they call this misinformation. Because in espionage, you don't even tell people the conclusion. Because if you tell people the conclusion, they will feel that they're being led. So what you do something even more subtle. You just give them certain limited information, then you step back. You know that you've given them such limited information that when they start to process the few pieces of information you've given them, you know that of their own accord, they're going to come to the wrong conclusion, or they're going to come to the conclusion that you want them to come to. So intelligence alone does not make someone, it does not lead to necessarily the right outcomes or the absolute understanding. Intelligence is just the processor. So one thing is to have intelligence. And let's be honest, that's still even a high level for most people. Most people, the intelligence isn't even strong. What to speak of the knowledge? So the first level is intelligence. Higher than that is wisdom. Okay. So the Vedic literatures are full of tremendous wisdom and understanding. Now we have something higher. Now you have someone who's got intelligence and they've got the right knowledge. So if you put the right knowledge through the processor of strong intelligence, then they can actually have a better perception and a better understanding about things. But there is one level higher than this. And again, that superior level is being spoken of by Krishna in this verse. Higher than intelligence, higher than wisdom is revelation. Higher than intelligence, higher than wisdom is revelation. Why is it higher? Because when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased, he himself in real time reveals whatever he wishes to reveal, whatever he knows is best for the individual and best for the situation. So the Vedic literatures, they themselves are like a vast ocean of wisdom. They're like a vast ocean of wisdom. But even more powerful is that across that vast ocean of wisdom, in real time, you are being given the specific wisdom that is most important for you in order to move forward on your journey and to become completely happy. So intelligence is there. Superior to intelligence is wisdom. Superior to wisdom is revelation and grace. We really want in modern society to receive the revelation of the Supreme. What does that mean? To receive the revelation of Krishna is to receive the real-time guidance. The real-time guidance and the real-time assistance of a person who loves you and knows you more than you know yourself. In the modern world, you have many people who are manipulative and selfish, right? So you have many people like that. They're going to try and do whatever's best for them at the cost of everyone else. In the modern world, you also have people who are well-intentioned, well-intentioned, but lacking insight, lacking understanding. Now, both groups are problematic. Group A is problematic because they're self-centered. So if there's no conflict of interest, you're okay. But at any point, if their own selfish desires are in conflict with you, then they're going to work against you. Okay, so that's a bad situation to be in. But the other side is also bad. The other side in some ways is even worse. Many of us know people who have a good heart, are nice guys or nice girls, but they lack wisdom, they lack insight. So what happens in that case is that the sentimental people come across the self-centered people. And when that well-intentioned sentimental person comes across people who are a bit cutthroat, who are a bit self-centered, they can get misused, mistreated, exploited. And you know what's funny? Some of the people that you meet in the world who are bitter, resentful, who may even be cutthroat, they used to be the good guy and the good girl. They used to be that open-hearted person. And what happened was they were misused, mistreated, manipulated, exploited, and after a certain point, their hearts became cold. I call this heart freeze. The warm-hearted, soft-hearted person, after being taken advantage of so many times, practically loses their faith in the goodness of humanity. And then their heart shuts down. Their heart shuts down. So both sides are problematic. The self-centered person is problematic. The nice guy, but who does not have wisdom, is also problematic. But Krishna consciousness, it goes in a different direction. When that sincere desire to know the truth is empowered by spiritual revelation, then you become the wisest, the sharpest, and at the same time, the most sincere. Literally, in the modern society, there is a need to protect the heart by spiritual wisdom. There's a need to maneuver the challenges of the material world with spiritual perception. And the solution, therefore, the solution that Krishna is giving here is to turn to the Supreme. By engaging in devotional service, one gains a superior revelation by mercy. By engaging in devotional activities, as is explained here, all the things which are clouding the heart, all the things which are clouding the perception, they're removed so that one can literally directly perceive the truth. So it's not a question of believing the truth. It's a question of being able to directly perceive the truth. We're not talking about being self-centered. We're not talking about being sentimental. We're talking about being a seer of the spiritual. This sentiment is a real issue. Imagine that your child has an emergency, a health emergency, and you rush your child to hospital. You bring them before the doctor, and you're like, doctor, my child, there seems to be something wrong. They're struggling to breathe. And the doctor says, no worries, I'm going to help. Stand aside. Okay, we're going to help your child. And the doctor is starting to explore and examine your child to see what's wrong. And your doctor's like, don't worry, it's going to be okay. We're going to help your child. I've never done this before, but I'm really sincere. I've never done this before. In fact, I don't know anything about medicine, but I'm really sincere. So it's going to be okay. You would be horrified. Hold on. Just put the brakes on there. What do you mean you've never studied medicine before? What do you mean you don't know anything about health and you're trying to save my child? No, don't worry. It's okay. I don't know anything about medicine or about health, but I'm very sincere. My heart's in the right place. It's going to be okay. Whoa. Stop. That sincerity without qualification is going to lead to a disaster. So self-centered, bad situation. But also being sentimental. Just having sentiment is also a bad situation. What we're looking for is revelation through Krishna consciousness. So our theology, our teachings are incredibly powerful. We don't believe in God. We do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Though great devotees that we read about in our tradition, they don't believe in God. They have the direct experience and interaction with the Supreme Personality himself. Srila Prabhupada was at a conference, a press conference. So he had these different journalists and, they said to Prabhupada, you're always speaking about the Supreme, you're always speaking about God, but we don't believe in God. And Prabhupada said, how can you say that? He's standing right behind you. So what does that mean? It means it actually means belief is for fools. Belief is for fools. Why would you believe in something that you could actually check yourself? So these so-called atheists, it's not really a strong argument. The idea that you're going to go back and forth just arguing about belief arguing about your idea using an instrument which by its very nature is material, it doesn't make sense. It's just like if someone says, I don't believe in microorganisms, because I've never seen one, right? Like, show me a microorganism. And the person says, okay, here's a microscope. If you just look into the microscope, you can see microorganisms. I'm not going to look into the microscope. I don't believe in microscopes. Well, what are you talking about? Here's a microscope. If you look through the microscope, you can see the microorganism. But why do I need to look through a microscope? I don't have to do anything. If there's microorganisms, they should reveal themselves to me. Whoa. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make sense. You see, this is the lack of humility. See, in our tradition, it is very clearly explained that we were once with Krishna. But due to envy, we left that spiritual paradigm. So it's just like if you're in a great relationship with someone and then they reject you and they walk away, if they realize at some future point that that relationship was really good and they miss you and they want to be with you again, then who has to make the first move? Can they click their fingers and say, well, I know I left her, but now, I want to be back with her. She should appear immediately. Who has to make the first move? The person who rejected you or you? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in that context of leaving the Supreme Lord to say that now I've changed my mind, he should immediately appear before me. That is the false arrogance, the false pride of the materialistic idea. That when I click my fingers, immediately God should come running. No. One other thing, and then we'll open up for questions. Another thing that you often hear, which is a really tricky argument, a really tricky ignorance that comes from the atheistic viewpoint. They'll say things like, if God's all good, why are there people suffering? Okay, now let's pause for a moment. When you hear many of these arguments, one of the things that you can do is look for the unconscious assumption. So right now in the modern world, everyone's speaking about unconscious bias. Okay, so when someone says, if there's a supreme God, why is there people suffering in the material world? So let's stop, let's pause. Okay, what's the assumption? The assumption here is that if God is good, if God really exists, there should be no suffering in the material world. So what have I assumed about the material world? What I've assumed about the material world is that the material world is our home. Where did that assumption come from? Where did that assumption come from? It came from that person's own mental speculation. Right? Whoever told you the material world is your home? Now, what is our response? Our response is that the material world is a prison. So therefore, the suffering that we see in the material world is completely consistent with our teaching. It's just like if you go into a prison and you're going to visit someone, and as you're walking to visit that person, you see one of the prisoners. The prisoner's like, excuse me, prison guard. There seems to be something wrong with the prison here. I mean, look at this door. This door seems to be jammed. I can't seem to get in and out whenever I want. Could you maybe fix the door so it can open up whenever I want? No, it's not an accident that the door isn't opening whenever you want. That's a prison cell. The fact that you can't get out of the prison when you feel like it, it's designed to be like that. So we're only able to understand something properly in relation or reference to its purpose. If you don't understand its purpose, you won't be able to evaluate it properly. So the material world is the prison. That's directly stated in our teachings. The material world is the prison house for those who are envious of Krishna. Those who wanted to try to enjoy separately from the Supreme. So the fact that they're suffering in the material world is a distinct feature of the material energy. And Krishna makes this point specifically. Mamai vamso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana, banashishtani indriyani, prakritishtani kashati. Mama eva amsa. Krishna says The living entities are my amsa. They're parts and parcels of me. Huh? But due to conditional life, he says what? Mana shishtani indriyani. Mana means mind. Shishtani means six. Indriyani means the senses. But due to conditional life, they're struggling with the six senses, including the mind. They're struggling with the body. They're struggling in the material world. It is the very nature of the material energy in that it causes struggle. But there's a way out. Devyesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. Mama vaye prapadyante, mayam etam tarantite. He says this divine energy of mind consisting of the material world, the three modes of material nature, are very difficult to overcome. And he's being kind, by the way. He says difficult, he means impossible. But those who surrender unto me, they can overcome this very easily. At the beginning of, no, towards the end of last year, before the lockdown, I remember in the morning, I was on a japa walk with a friend. So we both work in the same area. We were going for a morning walk and just, chanting. And, it's a corporate area. And as you look around, you'll see many corporate professionals and they're going for a jog before work. And it was really interesting because as we were observing them, I had a very distinct realization. I could understand that if you were to ask these people, what are you doing in the morning? You're jogging, I see you exercising. What are you doing? What's behind it? They would all tell you, and they mean it, and this conscious, on a conscious level, they would all tell you that we are keeping healthy and fit. On an unconscious level, unbeknownst even to them, what would actually be happening is at the back of their mind, they're running away from their fear of death. This deep fear, I'm scared, we're growing old, the body's growing old, I'm scared of disease, I'm scared to die. Especially many of you will have seen during this pandemic, if you just go for a walk and you look at the faces of the people, you can see anxiety. You can see nervousness, you can see fear. What's going to happen? Could I be subjected to this situation, to this disease? Huh? But these situations are always there. The death rate on planet Earth is 100%. In other words, everyone dies. Everyone dies. But not everyone has the fear of death. It's all a question of consciousness. So the most powerful thing about Krishna consciousness is that Krishna consciousness is the internal insurance policy. The insurance policy of the infinite. By engaging in Krishna consciousness, we come to such a high state of spiritual realization that independently of whatever happens to the body, I become identified and situated on the level of the soul. Mm-hmm. So therefore, the body will pass away, but when I'm fully spiritually realized, I have absolutely no fear of death. None. And when I'm fully spiritually realized, and even on the journey to spiritual realization, I experience such intense spiritual ecstasy that literally there's nothing in the material world that I'm attached to or desire, because the happiness and the intensity of happiness and spiritual experience and ecstasy that I'm experiencing makes even the greatest joy in the material world feel like taking poison. So we're all united by one thing, Anandamaya. We're pleasure seeking by nature. So what Krishna consciousness is saying, the very thing that all of us are looking for in the material world, deep, lasting, unending joy and happiness, you can have that to the highest and unlimited degree by developing your relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, you could say it's true or false, but it's completely plausible. It's completely accessible and testable. So if there's a claim that there is unending, lasting happiness through spiritual practice, and you can check that claim without giving up the other things that you're doing, you would be a fool not to test the proposition. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop and open up for questions and comments.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu. And, you know, I think that was just such an amazing discourse, an amazing presentation. Before we open up to the questions from the audience or the viewers, we are actually going to ask the viewers a question to stand a chance to win a copy of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So we have 2 to give away this evening, but there's 1 question, and I'm going to ask that now. And whoever drops the correct answer in the comments on the Zoom link, first we'll have 2 winners. So first and second, IT is watching out for the names or for the answers, the correct answers. So listening carefully. We are looking at the question. Listen carefully. What is, as His Grace Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu had mentioned quite early in the class, what is the small print to this verse? So I'm going to repeat that question. What is the small print to this verse? And the verse is 10:11. So what is the small print to this verse? So that is for you to answer, since you've been listening in, and drop in the right answer in the comments, and we'll watch out for those winners, and which I will announce at the end of the class this evening. The question, we have 1 question for you, Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu, and that has come through. I'll just read it to you right now. And the question goes as, what did you mean by being the seer? The seer. What do you mean by being the seer? So if you'd like to explain or expand on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So what that means is one can see or perceive spiritual truths by direct perception when the consciousness is sufficiently purified. So it's not a question of believing or not believing, but reaching the realization, saving up. When we engage in devotional service, we purify our perception. And when we purify our perception, then the higher truths, the things that we may read about initially, we start to directly perceive at those higher states of consciousness. Just in the same way that if I want to see a microorganism, I have to use the relevant means. It's not a question of just believing and arguing, because the arguments by themselves will not be conclusive. One has to experience by the devotional practice. Yeah? And if someone claims that they're not prepared to do the practice, then it means you're not serious about the experience. Just like if someone says, I want to be a doctor, but you're not prepared to study, you're not prepared to learn how to perform an operation, then do you really want to become a doctor? Or are you just saying that you want to become a doctor? You see? The conclusion of sincerity is to follow the correct procedure. So someone who's not prepared to do what it takes, that means that you're not really interested in knowing that truth. It's all about humility.
Okay, thank you for that, Prabhu. I've also got 1 more question that's come in. And the question is, and this is a broad one, so you're going to have to refine it somehow. And it says, Hare Krishna, how do you balance spiritual life with material life? So we're talking about the balancing act there. How do we balance spiritual and material life? I'll hand over to you.
Okay. So it depends on how you define spiritual and material. Okay. But I will give you a different way of looking at it. My simple answer is you don't balance it. What you do is you integrate it. Okay? So, what do I mean by integrate? The wonderful thing about Krishna consciousness is it can be practiced by anyone. And it's not about giving up a situation externally, it's about how we use that situation. So, an interesting story. So, there was a king, and he had a huge kingdom, great opulence, power, majesty, etc. The king was also very spiritual. He had a guru. And over many years, in his heart, he longed to serve his spiritual master. He longed to give up all the political, managerial responsibilities of the kingdom and just surrender to his guru and develop his relationship with God. And so he would speak often to his guru about this desire to serve his guru purely, etc. So his spiritual master said to him one day, okay, you've been saying this for many years. So, okay, I'm going to help you. I'm going to allow you to fully surrender to me. So what I'm going to ask you to do from this day onwards, I'm going to take ownership of the kingdom. And you can just act as a surrendered servant to me as your spiritual master. The king was so happy. He says, thank you, my dear guru. Thank you so much for taking this burden away from me. Please, now give me your instruction. Now let me just serve you. And the guru said to him, okay, so now as my surrendered servant, I would like you to go and sit on the throne of my kingdom and run my kingdom for me on my behalf. And the king, interestingly enough, he would run the kingdom, but his mentality was completely different now. Because it wasn't the burden. It wasn't the burden of running the kingdom in terms of his own consideration. It was now, okay, this is my guru's kingdom, and I'm doing this in service to him. So in terms of integration between the material and the spiritual, what it means is to do what we do, but do it for the pleasure of Krishna. Okay? So there's two aspects to this. First of all, we have some direct practices. So as we're doing, right, we're associating the A of spiritual life. We're associating with spiritual people, discussing spiritual topics. So you do that as your time allows. We have the B of spiritual life. We'll read the spiritual literatures, Srila Prabhupada's books, to understand more about Krishna and Krishna consciousness. So as your time allows, you'll do that. The C, the letter C, stands for chanting. So as your time allows, you'll spend some time every day chanting the names of Krishna. And when we do these things as time allows, it also helps us to see the rest of our lives, our job, our families, our children, our partner, as literally gifts from Krishna, gifts from God. And therefore, we interact with those gifts in the way that the Supreme Lord is pleased. So for example, we may clean the house thinking, I'm cleaning Krishna's house to make it nice and clean for him. We may interact with our partner, our spouse, thinking I'm going to interact with them in a way that would please the Supreme Person because they are part of Krishna's family. So we can integrate. And usually what this means practically is that we can spend some time at the beginning of our day doing some chanting, doing some reading, etc. And then that will spiritualize our mentality so that as we do our job, as we do all these things, we can literally reflect on and see spiritual lessons through our day-to-day activities. So it's not about balancing, it is rather about integrating. If I use what I have in a way that reminds me of my goal of coming closer to God, then everything in my life has literally become spiritualized. And even in our job, we may give out prasadam to our colleagues. We can use some of the money from our job or even the skills and the talents from our job in Krishna's service. there's so many ways that we can spiritualize what would be seemingly material situations. Okay. Next question.